thought I knew everything about my mother. I thought our story was simple. Girl meets boy, boy leaves, girl raises daughter alone in a beat-up, charming old house. It was a perfect story of love and sacrifice. But that's the thing about perfect stories. They're almost always lies. My mother, Eleanor, had just been buried. It was the hardest day of my life. The rain was cold, but the grief in my chest was colder. As I stood there, looking at the fresh dirt, a young woman, maybe early 20s, approached me. She wore a simple black dress, but her eyes, they were Mom's eyes, the exact shade of hazel that changed color with the light. She didn't grab me, she didn't cry. She just leaned in so close I could smell the faint scent of lilies on her, and she whispered 5 words that broke my reality. "I'm your sister, Amelia." I didn't react right away. I didn't push her or scream or even cry. I just stood there, letting the cold rain wash over me. Because the truth is, the moment she spoke, I felt my mother's presence disappear completely. The life I thought I had, the memory of the woman I loved, it all turned to smoke. And that was just the beginning. The worst part was finding out why she was kept a secret. It wasn't about shame or poverty. It was about pure terror. Look, I was 28. I was already dealing with enough. Mom had been sick a long time, and her final months had drained me. Emotionally, yes, but also financially. I was the only child. There were no cousins, no distant aunts, just me and Mom and this old house that needed so many repairs. When Clara, that was her name, said those words, the entire funeral felt like a bad movie. I just stared at her. Her face was a slightly younger, sharper version of my own. She had my mother's nose and the same tiny crooked front tooth I always hated about myself. "Who are you?" I finally choked out. The funeral director was looking over, ready to step in. Clara's face hardened, losing that brief moment of shared grief. She pulled a small, worn wooden token from her pocket. It was a little carved bird, a sparrow, and she pressed it into my hand. It was smooth, soft from years of handling. "I'm Clara," she said, her voice now firmer, though still low. I have proof, but I couldn't do this to her while she was alive. She was scared. "You need to know the truth about Eleanor, our mother." My mother had no secrets, I snapped, the denial automatic. "She loved me. She told me everything." Clara shook her head, a slow, pitying movement. "She told you the story she needed you to believe. Because the real story is why I have this." She pointed to the wooden sparrow token in my palm. She used to tell me it was a symbol, a little bird trapped in a cage. Ask around the house. Ask Mrs. Davis next door, the one who helped with the garden. Ask her about the first child Eleanor lost. With that, she turned and walked away. She didn't offer a hug, a condolence, or even a backward glance. She disappeared into the gray day as if she were a ghost, leaving me clutching the wooden bird, which suddenly felt heavy, like a small, unexpected anchor. When I got home, the house felt empty. The scent of lilies and old dust hung in the air. I kept the lights off. I went straight to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and looked at the token. The simple carving, the aged wood. It was definitely old. It looked like something Mom might have bought decades ago. I started pacing. The lie. The idea that my mother, my honest, straightforward, loving mother, had hidden a whole person from me. It was too massive to comprehend. It made every shared story, every quiet moment feel manufactured. I needed to know. I needed to see a birth certificate, a photo, something. So I started where any adult daughter would. I went into Mom's room. Mom's room was always sacred, neat, simple, filled with things that felt antique even when they were new. She only had one small jewelry box, a heavy ceramic thing. I opened it, expecting maybe an old photo or a letter. Inside were just 3 items: a silver locket, a cheap watch, and a folded piece of paper. The locket was empty. The watch was broken, stuck at 4:15. The paper, however, was a small, hand-drawn map. It was crude, sketched with a pen, showing the outline of our house, the one she fought so hard to keep. There was a big X marked on the floor plan of the living room, right near the old brick fireplace. The fireplace. Mom always kept the area around that fireplace clean. Not just tidy, but sterile. No rugs, no pictures leaning against the brick. Now I knew why. I went downstairs, a terrible, frantic energy bubbling inside me. It wasn't just about Clara anymore. It was about Eleanor. What kind of monster had I been living with? What else was a lie? I ran my hand along the brick near the floor where the X was on the map. It felt like every other brick, but then I noticed a slight discoloration on the mortar of one specific brick, about a foot off the floor, right behind where Mom's rocking chair always sat. It was a little newer, a little whiter. I got a butter knife from the kitchen. It took 5 minutes of furious scraping, but the mortar began to loosen. It wasn't until I found a tiny, almost invisible whiter loop hidden under a layer of soot that I knew I was right. I pulled the loop, and the brick slid out, quiet as a tomb door opening. Inside was a small velvet pouch. I pulled it out. It was heavy. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rush in my ears. I opened the pouch. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a single laminated birth certificate. I looked at the names. Mother, Eleanor Rose Davies, my mother's full maiden name. Father, Arthur Vance Ashworth. Child, Clara Eleanor Ashworth. Date of birth, June 14th, 1999. I was born in 2004. Clara was 5 years older than me. The father's name, Arthur Vance Ashworth. That name meant nothing. But the realization hit me like a train. The document was real. Clara was telling the truth. My mother hadn't just had a secret child. She had a whole secret life before me. But the most chilling part wasn't the name. It was the space reserved for the signature of the parent giving up rights. Both mother and father lines were signed. But across the top of the certificate, written in Mom's familiar, elegant script, were 3 words. The only way. I found Clara 3 days later. It wasn't hard. I tracked down Mrs. Davis, the neighbor Mom mentioned, and she confirmed everything. Oh, poor Eleanor, she sighed, wringing her hands. She lost that first baby. Not to death, dear, but to them. Them? The Ashworths. A very wealthy family. Old money. Arthur was the only son. Eleanor was just the cleaning girl at their summer home when she was 19. He was a summer fling, a big mistake. When she got pregnant, they paid her a huge amount to disappear. But Arthur's father, he wanted the heir. He was a cold, cruel man. They filed papers, took the child, Clara, and told Eleanor if she ever came near the girl, they would destroy her. They had the power to do it, too. This was the XYZ information, the missing piece of the puzzle. It wasn't a casual secret. It was a life and death threat. My mother was a victim, not a liar. I found Clara working at a small community garden near the city center. She was kneeling in the dirt, tending to some herbs. I walked up and handed her the wooden sparrow. It's real, I said. The birth certificate, the Ashworths. Clara stood up, wiping her hands on her trousers. I know it's real. I tracked my mother down 5 years ago. I didn't contact her, not directly. I just wanted to see her. I saw her life with you, and I knew she was happy, and I knew why I was given away. She explained that she grew up in a world of silence and gold. The Ashworths kept her far away, raising her with nannies and tutors, but never any love. Her grandfather, the cruel patriarch, made it clear that she was a trophy, not a grandchild. When she turned 18, she got access to some family documents and found the payment records to Eleanor, realizing her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had been forced out. But why now, Clara? Why tell me now at her funeral? You just said you were happy leaving her alone. Clara looked around the quiet garden. Because of the money, or rather the lack thereof. Grandfather Arthur Vance Ashworth died 6 months ago, the man who raised me. The Ashworth fortune is tied up in a dozen trusts, but I was disinherited. The old man cut me off, leaving everything to a distant cousin. I got nothing. I'm poor, Amelia. I have the name, the birth certificate, but no power. She paused, then looked me directly in the eyes. But I know one more thing. Something Mom hid. Something that might finally be hers and mine. The old man wasn't just cruel, he was paranoid. He thought Eleanor stole something important from the family before she was kicked out. He believed she hid a valuable piece of their history, a deed, a document, a piece of art, right here, in this house. This house? I scoffed. It's barely holding together. What history? She told him years ago in a threat that she hid his greatest sin where he'd never think to look. Clara whispered. I think Mom used this house, a place the Ashworths would never stoop to enter, as a safety deposit box. The puzzle was becoming clear, and the story was getting bigger. My mother wasn't just heartbroken. She was a secret agent of justice. The Ashworth family took her first child, and she took something of theirs in return. And that brought us to my biggest current problem, the house. Clara, I can't spend time hunting for some hidden treasure. I have to sell this place. I have a buyer, an aggressive one, closing in 2 weeks. I need the money for Mom's final bills. Clara's face went pale. Sell it? You can't. If the document is here, the Ashworths would fight you for the house, or worse, destroy it looking for whatever it is. You have to buy time. I don't have time or money. This house is all I have left to sell. Well, now you have me, Clara said, with a strange mix of authority and desperation in her voice. I'll pay you rent. I'll help with the bills. But you let me stay here, and we find whatever Mom hid. We owe it to her. If it's something big, it could be the revenge she never got to see through. I agreed, mostly because I had no choice. The idea of selling the house felt wrong, especially now. The next few days, we turned the house upside down. Clara's knowledge of the Ashworths family and her sheer desperation gave her a strange sixth sense. She noticed things I'd never would, like the weird dimensions of the kitchen pantry. It was too shallow. We worked through the pantry, pulling out old spice jars and canned goods. Finally, Clara pressed a tiny knot in the old wallpaper, and a section of the back wall, a thin sheet of wood, popped open. Behind it was a narrow space perfectly hidden, and inside wasn't a deed or a famous painting. It was a simple, leather-bound ledger. The ledger was old, filled with tight, meticulous handwriting. It wasn't Mom's. This is Arthur Vance Ashworth's grandfather's hand, the original patriarch, the one who built the empire. Clara breathed, turning the pages. The ledger wasn't a financial document. It was a secret account book. It detailed names, dates, locations, and payments. Payments not for business, but for cover-ups.
It listed payoffs to politicians, judges, and reporters. It detailed the manipulation of evidence for a fatal industrial accident in the 1950s that killed a dozen workers. It was a complete record of decades of corruption, power abuse, and even money laundering, all carefully hidden by the man who was too paranoid to trust banks. And on the very last page, Mom had added her own note, scribbled in shaky handwriting. A sparrow's wings are stronger than a gilded cage. You broke one life, but you won't break two. This is for Clara. Don't look back. This wasn't treasure. It was a bomb. The revelation changed everything. The ledger wasn't money, it was power. The kind of power that could bring down the whole untouchable Ashworth organization. Clara, who had always hated the family that raised her, wanted to expose them. She wanted justice for her mother, Eleanor, who was forced to give her up. I, Amelia, just wanted peace, to pay the bills and to understand the truth of my mother's final years. The man buying my house, Mr. Harding, was an agent for the Ashworth family. They weren't interested in the house. They were interested in its rumored contents. They were getting closer. I got 3 threatening calls in one day. Clara and I had to work together and fast. We can't just send this to the police. The Ashworths own the local police. They'll bury it. We need to go bigger, federal, or to the media that hates them. We needed proof that the ledger was authentic. The signature was the key. We decided to use the very thing the Ashworths wanted, the house. We called Mr. Harding, the aggressive buyer. I told him the deal was off. He went crazy, threatening lawsuits and calling my lawyer. I kept quiet, sticking to simple words. The house is no longer for sale. The next night, he showed up at the house. He wasn't alone. 2 large, silent men stood behind him. Mrs. Davis, he sneered, using Mom's maiden name. I know your mother left something here, and I know you don't have the money to fight the Ashworth legal team. Just hand it over. We'll give you double the asking price. No questions asked. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, standing in the doorway. Clara was just behind me, ready. Harding smiled, a cold, disgusting expression. The ledger, Amelia, the one Eleanor stole 50 years ago and had the nerve to hide on the property they built their name on. Don't be foolish. Clara stepped forward, holding the ledger in her hand. The ledger is evidence. Evidence that details decades of illegal activity, my grandfather's crimes. Do you really want to force me to hand this over to the federal authorities instead of just making it disappear? Harding's eyes went wide. He looked at Clara, really looked at her, then back at me. He recognized her. He recognized the Ashworth hazel eyes. Clara, he stammered, you're supposed to be in Europe. I'm here now, and I'm tired of your family's secrets. She didn't hand him the ledger. Instead, she took out her phone. Mr. Harding, you're on speakerphone with the reporter from the Washington Post. They're very interested in hearing about the Ashworth Group's historic documents. Harding lost all composure. He grabbed the ledger. But Clara was ready. She pulled back, and the sound of tearing paper filled the air. She only let him grab the cover. The rest of the pages fluttered to the ground. You lose, she said, her voice shaking, but utterly triumphant. The originals are already on their way to the authorities. This is just for show. The truth was, they weren't. We had made high-resolution copies, but we hadn't sent them yet. It was a perfect, necessary lie. Harding and his men left in a flurry of curses, knowing they were defeated. The threat was gone. The next morning, the house was silent again. The real silence this time. The peaceful kind. The Ashworths never bothered us again. They knew a fight over the house would drag the ledger into the light, and that was a risk they couldn't take. Clara and I sat in the living room near the fireplace, sipping coffee. We had the ledger pages spread out, the original pages, secured in a waterproof case. We spent the day going through them, deciding what to do. It wasn't just about the ledger. It was about our mother. We found old faded photographs of Eleanor, tucked between the pages. Photos of a young, terrified woman. And photos of a chubby baby, Clara. "She kept you safe," I whispered, tears finally coming. "She gave you a different life, even if it was a cold one. And she gave us justice." Clara put her hand over mine. "And she gave you a sister. She kept the secret not to hide me, but to keep the people who hurt her away from you. She was afraid the Ashworths would try to steal you too. That's why she was so secretive, so overprotective. She was protecting her second chance."
We decided not to sell the ledger to the highest bidder or bury it for a fortune. We sent anonymous copies of the most damning evidence to a national investigative news outlet and to a specific financial watchdog group known for taking on powerful families. We gave Eleanor her final revenge, the quiet, devastating kind. We didn't want their dirty money. We wanted their downfall. And the house? We kept it. We pooled our resources. Clara found a job, and I went back to school online. We fixed the cracks, painted the walls, and turned the backyard into a beautiful wild garden, just the way Mom would have loved. We were half-sisters, raised in completely different worlds, but bound by a love we both had to dig through years of silence to find. We even figured out the wooden sparrow. Clara recognized the carving style. It was a copy of a famous statue in a remote museum, a statue depicting a woman who was forced to flee her home, but took only a sparrow with her as a sign of hope. Every day I look at Clara. I look at her eyes, her nose, her crooked tooth. It doesn't hurt anymore. The memory of my mother isn't a lie. It's a mosaic made up of pieces I just didn't have until now. The great, difficult, courageous life she lived, it was all for us. And sometimes, when I sit in the rocking chair by the newly mortared fireplace, I can almost hear her voice, quiet and strong, saying, "I did what I had to do." My name is Amelia, and the secret my mother kept, the one that started when a young woman whispered, "I'm your sister," at her funeral. It didn't just give me a sister. It gave me the truth and the best parts of my mother's broken, beautiful heart. What a story, right? It makes you wonder what secrets our own families hold. Did my mother do the right thing by hiding the truth? Or should she have told me everything? Let me know in the comments. If you loved this story and want to hear more long-form, intense narratives like this one, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support is how I can keep telling these massive, incredible stories. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. See you in the next video.